Hi everyone, I'm Nadine and I am an environmental science graduate from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And as of now, things are going to get a little hot because we are going to be talking about climate change. Alright, so before I started this lecture, I made myself a cup of tea, which I left beside me. And now, 10 minutes later, this area around me has gotten a bit warmer, although the room that I'm in is quite cool. So by the time I end this lecture, or the tea finishes, the steam from the tea would have dispersed itself across the room, making it a bit warmer. So just like how the average temperature of the room can change within a few minutes, the average temperature of the earth has been changing over hundreds of years. And we are going to have a look at what has been causing this. In our hierarchy of models, climate change falls under the last section. So far, we have been through the physical, biological, and chemical processes or aspects to help us understand how the Earth was created and the factors that contribute towards a habitable planet. So in the beginning, we learned that we are made from stars. From not too hot, not too cold, we have found that the distance alone to the sun does not make the Earth habitable, but rather too cold. We also know that the greenhouse gases make it too hot. We then learned about oceans and atmosphere, and together they transport heat from the equator to the pole to form what we know as weather and climate. From our last talk, we have learned about human evolution, and since then, the human population has been growing. We also know that humans have a significant impact on Earth systems, and now we're going to learn how humans impact climate change. So to do that, I'm going to tell you a very interesting story about climate change, where you then will be able to know what climate change is and how we go on our daily life routines, where we see or hear of activities that causes climate change but we don't realize it. Or worse is when we feel the effects of climate change, like the tornadoes that occurred in Pietermaritzburg a few years ago. That was not a coincidence, that was a result of climate change. But maybe you're in a place that has not experienced any tornadoes. Like I haven't experienced any severe drought like the people of Cape Town have. But that's the thing about climate change. We don't all feel it the same way, but it affects us all. And we're going to find out how. But if it affects us all, isn't there anybody doing anything about this? Well, of course they are, and we are going to find out who is doing what to address the effects of climate change. Very often, climate change and global warming are used as one definition, although the definitions slightly differ. So climate change is the gradual change from usual weather patterns of a particular region over a long period of time, whereas global warming is the overall warming of the planet based on average temperature over the entire surface of the Earth. So now that we know what climate change is, let's see what causes it. So we have our natural causes, which includes wildfires, such as those experienced in Cape Town. We have volcanic eruptions, which cause warming by releasing greenhouse gases, but it also causes cooling by emitting gas particles that shade sunlight. Then ocean currents and changes in the Earth's orientation were covered in atmospheric circulation, where we learned that they distribute solar radiation across the Earth's surface. And then moving on to human activities, which include agriculture, such as rice production and the raising of livestock. Now, mammals such as your cattle, camels, and deers pass methane as flatulence. In other words, they pass methane gas. Now, this is a greenhouse gas and contributes directly to greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere. Now, can you remember what greenhouse gases are and what the greenhouse effect is from light and air? But it was a while ago, and we will get into a bit more detail soon. Then we have deforestation. This is the removal of trees, which act as carbon sinks. Now, through deforestation, not only are we removing carbon sinks, but also increasing carbon dioxide, because when trees are cut down, burned, or allowed to rot, the stored carbon is released back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. Your land use change. Examples of this is when the land is cleared for industrial development or agriculture fields. And then a major cause is the burning of fossil fuels. So most greenhouse gas emissions come from industries that burn fossil fuels, such as coal, oil, petroleum, and natural gas. Now, South Africa is home to many coal-powered industries. Now, these are just a few examples of natural and human causes. The question now is, how exactly are these causing the weather and overall climate to change? Now, this is explained by the greenhouse gas effect. Now, although this was covered earlier, we are going to go through it again because it is important and you will know why soon. Now, the greenhouse gas effect is a natural process that warms the Earth's surface. Your greenhouse gases are water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. So let's look at this in a bit more detail. Sun is the source of warmth on Earth. Ice and clouds reflect some of its radiation away and the rest is absorbed by land and water. Some is re-emitted as heat and some of the heat radiates back into space while the rest is absorbed and trapped into the atmosphere by greenhouse gases, warming the Earth. Now this is good for us because this is the reason why life exists as we know it. However, human activities such as agriculture and the burning of fossil fuels have been increasing greenhouse gas concentrations rapidly since the start of the Industrial Revolution in 1760, trapping extra heat into the atmosphere. Now, extra heat trapped into the atmosphere means that the temperature is rising. The Keeling curve is a graph of the accumulation of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere based on continuous measurements taken of an island in Hawaii from 1959 to the present day. So from the graph here, we can see that there has been an exponential growth from before 1960 up until September 27, 2022. In 2021, the levels of carbon dioxide measured 420 parts per million. This was the highest in history. So what do we know so far? We know what climate change is, what greenhouse gases are, and what the greenhouse effect is. We know that humans can cause climate change and have been doing so since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution by activities such as the burning of fossil fuels that causes greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, which causes more heat to be trapped into the atmosphere. Now the graph above shows yearly anomalies from 1880 to 2020, and they all show rapid warming in the past few decades, and they all show that the last decade has been the warmest. So how do we know that humans are the cause? So we have something that's known as the science of attribution, which figures out the likelihood or severity of a particular event happening today compared to how it might have unfolded in an imaginary world that humans have not warmed. So how does this work? So when there is an extreme weather event, scientists first determine how frequently an event of that magnitude might occur based on historical and observational data. Now this data can go back to the 19th century. Attribution studies then run identical models under two scenarios. In the first scenario, your greenhouse gas concentrations are kept constant at some level from the past before humans started burning fossil fuels. And the climate model is run, say, over a 150-year period. Now, this is called the counterfactual world, which is the world that might have been. For the second scenario, the climate model goes back in time again, plugging in the actual greenhouse gas concentrations for each year as they have increased over time. By comparing the results from the two model scenarios, scientists can estimate how much human emissions from fossil fuel activity have shifted the Earth. Statistical methods are then used to quantify the differences in severity and frequency of the events. Now here we have a graph that shows observed temperature from NASA from the 1850 to the 1900, And we can see that the primary driver for increased global temperature in the industrial era is human activity. The increase in greenhouse gases and temperature have consequences for the ocean, food security, health, as well as weather. Now, ice sheets such as Greenland and Antarctica are melting. Now, this extra water that was once held by glaciers caused sea levels to rise, which causes flooding in coastal regions. So white ice melting also means that less heat is reflected back into the atmosphere. Also, oceans are a major carbon sink. So as oceans heat, water expands, which releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. It also causes food security challenges, where growing crops become difficult and your water supply diminishes. Now, health is a serious consequence. In urban areas, the warm environment increases the amount of smog, which causes problems such as asthma, your respiratory diseases, and lung cancer. Johannesburg experiences very high smog levels. Increasing temperatures also make weather more extreme, resulting in more intense storms, floods, snowfalls, and longer and frequent droughts. So while everyone will feel the effects of climate change, the most vulnerable are the people living in poor countries. So we now know what greenhouse gases are. We know that too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere traps more heat into the atmosphere, and this causes a change in weather. So looking at this graph, on the y-axis we have the number of events globally, and on the x-axis we have the year. The graph shows us that as greenhouse gases increase, so does the temperature, and so does the number of extreme weather events, which are your floods, storms, and your droughts. So we can see how human activities increase carbon dioxide emissions, which in turn increase temperature, which causes more extreme weather, resulting in more intense storms, floods, snowfalls, and longer and frequent droughts. But how do we know all of this, and who or what is monitoring these changes in the climate? Well, this is where the IPCC comes in, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So over the years from 1995, they have made 4 key findings that have found that human activities have a significant influence on climate change. In October 2018, they published a special report of global warming of 1.5 degrees, which says that the Earth's surface temperature must remain below 1.5 degrees. Now I know what you're thinking. Below 1.5 degrees, that means we will freeze. So what they mean is that below 1.5 degrees, meaning the Earth's surface temperature must not exceed a 1.5 degree rise above pre-industrial levels. Now pre-industrial is a period of time which is from the 1850 to the 1900, before the start of the Industrial Revolution. So that the global effects will be less frequent and intense. Now, in order to do this, the net carbon dioxide emissions must be zero by 2055, meaning that the amount of carbon dioxide pumped into the atmosphere must equal to the amount being removed. But how do we know where we are in terms of this temperature rise and carbon emissions? Well, the IPCC gives us that information. If we look at this graph, it shows us how close we are to the 1.5 degree rise above pre-industrial levels. So your x-axis shows the years from 1960 to 2018, and the y-axis shows the global temperature change relative to 1850 to the 1900, which is a pre-industrial period. So it was found that human-induced warming has already reached approximately 1 degree above pre-industrial levels in 2017. And it shows us that if this current warming rate continues, the world would reach human-induced warming of 1.5 degrees around 2040. But we cannot let this happen. Remember we said that net CO2 emissions must be zero by 2055. But this is a global study. So how does this affect South Africa? South Africa's landscapes are made up of valleys, mountains, forests, deserts, coastlines, and grassy savannas that are breathtaking. South Africa is situated in between two oceans, the Atlantic Ocean and the Indian Ocean. The coast is an important tourist attraction, so these two factors make the ocean important and unique to South Africa and its citizens. The climate conditions in South Africa range from Mediterranean in the southwestern corner of South Africa, temperate in the interior, and subtropical in the northeast. A small area in the northwest has a desert climate. Most of South Africa is warm, with sunny days and cool nights. Rainfall generally occurs during summer, except in the southwest around Cape Town, where rainfall occurs during winter. However, this unusual climate experienced by South Africa is changing due to the impacts of climate change. So just to quickly recap, we have seen what causes global warming, how it is monitored and measured, and the global effects it has. But how does it affect us? I see in South Africa. Now, South Africa is part of the world that is contributing to climate change by emitting greenhouse gases. South Africa is actually the world's 14th largest emitter of greenhouse gases, primarily because the country's energy system depends heavily on coal, which is a fossil fuel, if you remember. South Africa has a greenhouse gas inventory that reports the country's greenhouse gas emissions in accordance with the IPCC requirements. Now, this table is taken from an inventory published in November 2014 that shows the greenhouse gas trends in South Africa for a period of 10 years from 2000 to 2010. Now, it's a complicated looking table, so I pulled out only the important information, which is the years and the total. So with that information pulled out, we can now actually see the greenhouse gas trend. So on the y-axis, we have greenhouse gas emissions that are measured by the carbon dioxide equivalent, and on the y-axis, we have the years from 2000 to 2010. Now, the dotted line is a trend line that clearly shows us that the greenhouse gas emissions have and still are increasing. But is this affecting us? We have seen earlier that increasing greenhouse gas cause an increase in temperature, which in turn results in extreme weather and global effects that we have all seen. But is it having an effect here in South Africa? And if so, in what ways? So here we have our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, who just answered our question. He said that we in South Africa are now seeing the real effects of climate change. In 2017, Cape Town experienced a severe drought as a result of exceptionally low rainfall from 2015 to 2017. As the water levels in reservoirs drastically fell in 2017, it seemed very likely that the city would reach critically low water levels and municipal water supply would need to be shut off. This is what they call day zero, which is a critical stage of the drought where most of the city taps would be switched off. The graph was taken from a case study on the Cape Town drought, and it shows the cumulative daily rainfall for the past 20 years at the Waterkloof Dam, which is the biggest dam in the Western Cape and is responsible for feeding water in Cape Town. So on the y-axis, it shows the accumulated rainfall, and on the x-axis, it shows the months. Now the red line shows the year 2017, and as we can see, it is much lower than usual. The satellite images above show the Waterkloof Dam during the year 2014 and 2017. The water shortage is clearly visible. The image below shows an almost empty dam in February 2018. As residents of Cape Town stocked bottles of water and prepared themselves in the event of day zero. Now this was avoided due to restrictions of water use, voluntary water conservation by residents, and measures such as your wide-scale leak repair, and rainfall levels started increasing in the mid 2018. But Cape Town is not the only place affected by climate change. It is happening across the country. In South Africa's Eastern Cape province, no one can remember the last proper downfall, as they have been battling with a brutal ongoing drought. The Northern Cape is also one of the worst hit by an ongoing drought, which has led to the death of thousands of livestock, which is a primary source of income. Over the past 3 years, many of us saw an increase in severe weather in South Africa, with extreme storms, tornadoes, heat waves hitting parts of KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng, and the Eastern Cape. Now, the pictures above, pictures below, shows a flood that happened in April 2019 in KwaZulu-Natal. Now, the one at the left and center are of a temple which is in my area. And the 10 years that I have stayed here, this is the first time such extreme flooding had occurred. That day we could not travel to work, the roads were closed. And then the picture on the right bottom shows the Durban M4 highway that collapsed, which was as a result of the same storm in April. But that was not the worst. In April 2022, KZN was hit with yet another flood where at least 435 people died across the province, with an unknown number of people missing. Several thousand homes were damaged or destroyed. Critical infrastructure, including major roads, transportation, communication, and electrical systems, were also impacted by the flooding. It is one of the deadliest natural disasters in the country in the 21st century, and the deadliest storm since the 1987 floods. A natural state of disaster was declared. Now, these are just examples of small-scale, localized climate effects, which had severe impacts for some locals, especially those that lived beyond bridges that collapsed. They were isolated for days with no clean water or food. These supplies had to be delivered by helicopter. Now, these localized effects were able to be rehabilitated. But what does climate change mean for South Africa? High temperature will reduce already depleted water sources, contributing to the increasing number of droughts. This potentially threatens agriculture, which in turn results in problems with food security. Now, South Africa is ranked third in the world in terms of biodiversity. Temperature increases could cause desertifications in areas such as the Northern Cape. So reducing biodiversity in return affects the tourism industry, which in turn affects the country's economic growth. And then diseases such as malaria are prevalent in South Africa. Now, climate change could potentially extend the areas prone to these diseases. So now, in addition to learning what climate change is, the cause and effects, we have seen the impact it has, but how can we deal with it? Now, this is done through either mitigation or adaptation. So mitigation refers to efforts to reduce or prevent emissions of greenhouse gases, or to enhance their removal from the atmosphere. Now, ways to mitigate include preserving or enhancing carbon sinks, sustainable transport, renewable energy, and green infrastructure. Whereas adaptation refers to efforts to adjust to climate variation, which basically means making changes to prepare for climate change, such as health programs. But I stay in Durban, and after the flooding that happened in April, I was curious to know what my district officials' plans to address climate change are, and I found the Durban Climate Change Strategy, which is a document developed by the local government, which is Intergovernmental municipality. Now, the document lays out a citywide approach to adapting to climate change and mitigating Durban's contribution to climate change. The document also states that Durban is responsible for 5.2% of South Africa's total greenhouse gas emissions, with the transport and industry as the biggest contributors to Durban's greenhouse gas emissions, as seen in the chart above. But South Africa aims to mitigate climate change, and to do so, Cyril Ramaphosa signed into law a carbon tax bill, which became effective in June 2019, with the primary objective to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in a sustainable, cost-effective, and affordable manner. And now we can conclude, because we now know that climate change is a gradual change in weather of a region, and that the greenhouse gas effect is the reason planet Earth is habitable and makes it not too hot or not too cold, but just right for life to exist. But we also know that humans have caused too much greenhouse gas emissions that is making the planet too hot. And this is causing severe climate change and extreme weather events that is in turn affecting the environment, humanity, and the economy. But there are ways to stop humans from emitting too much greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And that, as of June 2019, if some people do not reduce their emissions, they will get taxed. So we're going to see how we can live sustainably and reduce emissions in our next talk about sustainable development. Thank you.